will have to decide on your future. In the next few months, we shall settle the constitutional arrangements for merger.
The year 1961. Making a total of 36 radio talks in 3 languages, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew was all out to explain to the people the issues behind Singapore's battle for merger with Malaya. Singapore's political and economic future was to be decided a year later by the people in a massive exercise, the Referendum on Merger, on the 1st of September 1962. There were strong reasons for the merger with Malaya. Although Singapore attained self-government in 1959, the People's Action Party leaders never lost sight of their main political objective, that is, to win full independence from the British. One way to achieve this was to unite with Malaya, which already became independent in 1957. Besides, Malaya and Singapore were separated only by a narrow strip of water. The close proximity had brought about social and economic ties. Malayan rubber, copra and tin were brought south and traded through the Singapore port. At that time, the island's economic survival depended largely on entrepot trade. The merger with Malaya would therefore ensure its hinterland, but there were reservations from the Malayan side. Tunku Abdul Rahman was afraid that the Federation's racial composition would be upset by the addition of 1 million Chinese from Singapore. At that time, there were pro-communist members in the Singapore government who also resisted the idea of merger, simply because Kuala Lumpur was anti-communist. This would hinder their plans for communist expansion. It was only when the Tunku saw the threat posed by the possible communist takeover of Singapore that he considered the proposal for merger. At a luncheon hosted by the Foreign Correspondents Association, the Tunku announced that there could be closer political and economic cooperation between Malaya and Singapore, as well as Sarawak, Borneo and Brunei. 2 months after the Tunku's historic announcement, leaders from Malaya, Singapore and the British North Borneo territories met to discuss the terms of the Federation. It was agreed that Singapore would have greater autonomy over its internal affairs than the other member states. Singapore would retain control of education and labour policies in exchange for accepting fewer seats in the federal parliament. Singapore would have its own head of state, a cabinet headed by a prime minister, and its own civil service. But defence, security and external affairs would be controlled by the central government. The people of Singapore would not automatically become Malaysian citizens, but could become federal nationals holding federal passports. These conditions were spelt out in the Singapore government white paper put forward to London in November 1961. The British agreed to these terms. While these negotiations were going on, there was a split within the People's Action Party. Left-wing members left the PAP to form the Barisan Socialists, with Dr. Lee Siew Chow at the helm. Thus began the tussle between the Barisan Socialists and the PAP to win over the hearts and minds of the people. Then the government decided that the people should vote in a nationwide referendum on merger.
While on the one hand, the proposal was put forward as a government proposal, on the other hand, it should be seen to have received the support of the people. Particularly when in the Legislative Assembly, the government had a majority only of 1 seat. So we could not simply push it through. We would have been wrong in it. Even assuming we had a larger majority, I think a referendum was necessary.
The referendum listed 3 options, symbolized by state flags. Option A was represented by the Singapore flag, merger under the terms proposed by the PAP, as spelled out earlier in the Singapore government white paper. Option B, proposed by the Barisan Socialists, meant a complete and unconditional merger on the same terms as Penang and Malacca. Option C, with terms no less favorable than for the Borneo territories, was proposed by Lim Yew Hock of the Singapore People's Alliance. The Barisan Socialists, which was against merger at first, had actually come up with an option for merger. Why?
It was because they were following the CPM argument that Malaya consists of Malaya and Singapore, a truly unified Malaya. So they went along with that line of the CPM. If there were a simple referendum which suggested, well, yes and no, a clear-cut answer, then I think the Barisan Socialists would not have put up, nobody would put up any alternatives at all.
But with three alternatives, the political leaders had to convince the people of the option which was deemed best for them.
Your vote, your choice.
There were very big rallies. I recollect Farrer Park one and Fullerton Square for another. Very big rallies for both groups, Barisan and PAP. If anything, the Barisan rallies were bigger and noisier, I would say. The Barisan wielded tremendous power among the masses here, and the whole thing was rather aggressive and was going on alongside, it should be said, all sorts of strikes and trade union demonstrations and other diversions which the Barisan were mounting in general in order to try and discredit the PAP. This is a very noisy and confused period.
On its part, the PAP did not stop at public speeches only. Eye-catching posters highlighted the advantages of merger. The people were assured of equal priority for the 4 languages and autonomy in education and labor policies in the PAP-style merger. One person who prepared such campaign posters was Chan Chi Seng.
And there's one poster which says a hand holding a key. On the finger itself, they have written Brunei, Singapore, Malaya, and all that. And the key itself indicates the happiness, the key to happiness. In other words, if we secure a merger, then you hold the key to happiness, to 幸福, 幸福之时. We issue a lot of, at that time we call 海报, it's something like the pamphlets, and we have got banners,
Besides public rallies, films were screened at community centers showing the people how to vote in the referendum.
Special rights, equality for our 4 languages. Vote for common citizenship, for automatic Malaysian citizenship. Vote for alternative A on referendum day. Vote for our Singapore flag, the symbol for alternative A.
From the psychological point of view, the people of Singapore had become accustomed to the Singapore flag. The Penang flag was foreign to them. So also was the flag of North Borneo and Sarawak. And this was one point which the opposition protested against. They knew that it had a psychological impact on the voters.
In a last-minute bid to counter the merger issue, the Barisan Socialists urged the people to cast blank votes to protest the fact that they were not given an option against merger. This created quite a bit of confusion.
Well, people didn't really understand what was going on. At first, they were suspicious of the idea of blank votes because you were supposed to be penalized for casting a blank vote, so of course they were reluctant to get themselves into trouble, you see. And then there was this, on top of that came this realization that if you cast a blank vote, it would, in theory, go to the Legislative Assembly, which was dominated by the PAP. So, why were you voting for the PAP? Why was the Barisan telling you to vote for the PAP? Then the Barisan says, well, that even those who want to vote for the PAP should cast a blank vote, and it's going to show that the whole thing is a nonsense, you see, and that it's against the will of the people. Well, of course, it wasn't against the will of all the people.
Referendum day arrived, September the 1st, 1962. It was an important day, and many even dressed up for the occasion. Voting on the referendum was compulsory. A good 90% of the registered citizens of Singapore turned up to cast their vote for their country's future and theirs. It was a massive exercise, quite like a general election. One citizen, one vote. But unlike an election where certain constituencies may have a walkover, the referendum gave everybody the chance to vote. In the referendum, the counting of votes was centralized at the Singapore Badminton Hall. The people were as eager to know the results as the politicians themselves. If the majority had voted for alternative A, the communists would be soundly defeated. Buses were chartered to bring in ballot boxes from the various polling stations. Some 8,000 civil servants were engaged in carrying out the referendum exercise. The count went on throughout the night and was ready by 8:30 the next morning. But the Barisan Socialists demanded a recount. As the recount started, Dr. Lee Siew Cho and his party members left the Singapore Badminton Hall. By 11 a.m., the results were ready. 71% had voted for option A, the PAP option. Only 1.7% chose the Barisan option and 1.4% option C. And even with 25% blank votes, it was a clear win for the PAP. The referendum had given the people their choice, and although the merger lasted less than 2 years, it was a step which eventually led to full independence for Singapore.